some intro slides first, right? So if you don't know us, we are from a company called the Woke Salaryman, and we make stories about personal finance. So here are some examples of the kind of stories that we do. So this is, for example, more like straightforward, bread and butter, standard personal finance stuff, like things like, is the Singapore market still worth investing in? Why are taxes important? What are taxes? What are bonds? What are ETFs and things like that? So these are quite standard. We say what something is, or we say our opinions about some financial asset or something like that. We also talk about things like, for example, when it comes to talent development or like how to keep yourself relevant, things like why Singapore and also us as individuals, for example, need to move up the value chain. So one of the reasons that we're here is also because we want to find out what it's like for y'all to read our content, because we really do write it from a very Singapore perspective. I won't say Singaporean, but I'm Malaysian myself. I'm a permanent resident in Singapore, but the rest of our team is Singaporean. So we don't specifically try to write for audiences outside of Singapore, but it's been very heartening to hear and see engagement from all of you all actually. I think Philippines has been quite very engaged when it comes to your Zoom is working. Yeah. You have things to add? You said test.
No, it's intense.
Oh, intense.
The comments from the...
Right. In a good way,
Good.
Yeah, so examples is next slide. So, but I think over time we've also found that when we first started the page, right, people would tell us like, hey, you're making stuff about personal finance. How many topics can you all make until you run out of content? So our response has always been, don't know, we just make until no more, then we stop. And it's been 5+ years and we haven't stopped because there's a lot of things to write about. Because we found out that actually, even though personal finance seems very niche, there are a lot of things that actually is connected to personal finance. Things like mental health, sustainability, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with your family members. Do you, for example, give an allowance to your parents? How much do you give? Will you pay for your parents' retirement? Things like that. So there's a lot of things that actually is related to personal finance. So some of the other stories that we've done, for example, the one on the left is a story that we wrote about. It's almost like a fictional story. It was inspired by a scene in The Shining, where there's this scene with the bartender. So I thought that was a great scene, and the story in the gist is basically a rich man goes to a bar and he's bragging to the bartender about how rich he is. But in his journey to become rich, he had kind of estranged from his family. He did not have a good relationship with his family. So he's bragging to the bartender and say, hey, I'm very rich, but you know what? Starting tomorrow, I'm going to be a family man. I'm going to sell my company and I'm going to spend time with my family full time. But the twist is that this bar is the underlying because he's dead, basically. So it's too late. So we also don't just tell you to earn money and how to maximize the amount of money. We try to ask you what is it for? What is your enough point? And everybody has a different answer to that question. So we are also all about why and not just how and what. The middle one is actually based on a real story that we basically interviewed somebody whose brother passed away when he was 28. And it was like over an hour-long conversation. We went, and then one more of our colleagues went also. Everybody cried at the end because it was just very sad. So we also try to have some documentary-esque thing where we interview people and bring real-life things. So, because for example, when your brother gets cancer, it's also a personal finance thing. It deals with things like what will happen to his assets after he passes, things like estate planning, writing your will, which is not a very nice composition to have, but something that we should think about eventually. And then the last one, I'll just go very quickly, is something I wrote when I watched a Korean reality TV show called MBTI Inside, and the premise is quite cool. I think they just got a household and they put an MBTI of every type inside the household. So there's 16 people inside. Then there's one INTP, one ENFP, blah, right? And then there was a lady in there who said that she loves sunsets and sunrises, which related to me because I also derive great pleasure from sunset and sunrise, right? And she made a resolution that she would want to buy the tallest tower in Seoul so that she could be the first and the last person to see the sun set and rise. But when she got that goal, she realized that it wasn't what she thought it would be. So a lot of times we have these money goals that we have that we think would give us some pleasure that extends beyond just having money. But often when you get there, then that goalpost will shift internally. So we also think about things like personal finance goals and what they actually mean and how they might change as you change as a person, things like that. Yeah. So this is our IG Instagram page, and you can follow us there. It's probably our most engaged platform.
I think nowadays it's TikTok, but then people that are very angry, so we don't look at the comments.
Yeah, TikTok people can be a bit tumultuous. It's hard to, too scary. It's hard to predict what they will say. Twitter is also the same. Like we post on Twitter, then we just run away. We don't even look at the comments. We're also on Facebook, LinkedIn, and there's also a website called the WokeSalaryman.com. And then Riming would also like to make a point that there is a Substack, an email Substack that he would really love if you all could follow. Because when we are on the email Substack thing, we are free from algorithms. Because algorithms have done some really weird things to our pages, and our posts have tanked before based on some changes in Facebook algorithms. Right. There'll be a QR here. Riming will be extremely happy if some people, like one person signs up.
So it's just even one person signs up, like I will have.
You'll make your day.
Yeah, make my day, just fulfill my trip.
Yeah. So some people have made
One,
a day.
two, okay, 3 people, okay. 4 people, thank you very much.
Yeah. So we also have a YouTube channel that I'm trying to sort of experiment with and grow. It's more long-form content and our faces can be seen. So I don't know if that is good content or not. We'll try. So you can give it a shot, but no worries, like we don't, no pressure to subscribe if it's not your kind of thing. Yeah. And then a lot of people ask us about our team, how big is our team? Right now we have 5 full-timers, including the 2 of us, and also 1 intern. And that's about it. We try to keep ourselves small, and this is a big cornerstone of how we run our business. We run it a bit differently from our other peers, for example, who started businesses around that COVID era, because it was a lot of stuff about seed funding, round A, round B and stuff, and we just did not do that. Our business is quite bootstrapped. We don't have investors, and we just started it ourselves. As a result, our office is not sexy. It's a very bare bones and humble space, but we like to think that we have not scaled in terms of the people that we hire, but we scale our capabilities. So with a small team, we reach a lot of people. That's our goal. Next one. So what we'll do to just start is that we'll share 2 stories from our book. I think these 2 stories will give a good snapshot of what you can expect from the book, right? So let's start. So the first one is actually the very first story that is in our book, and we thought that this was very important because this personally was a big obstacle for both of us when we first graduated university, because we did not come from very rich parents, and we had friends who were very, very much richer than us, and there was a lot of bitterness, and there was a fork in the road, where we could have went down the road of the structure is corrupted, we will never succeed. So it was actually quite narrow. So we thought this was very important to start with, especially for fresh grads. So yeah,
I think nowadays on the online space, there's a lot of focus on stuff like systemic failure, stuff that there's stuff that's beyond your control. I think sometimes you just need to remind yourself that actually there are a whole ton of things within our control, and I think this is what this is.
Yeah. So I'll just start. I'll just read it out with some additional points here and there. So the title of the comic is "How Much in Life is Really Actually Up to You," and one of the inspiration for it was the idea that people talking about the idea of agency, like, hey, you can do it if you try harder. And this person just happened to be somebody who had a much more privileged position. So we often forget where people come from and how much that factors into their outcomes in life. And we're trying to strike a balance between these two. So in sociology, there's a concept called structure versus agency, and these 2 factors make huge impacts on how our lives play out. So let's talk about what these things are, right? So structure is stuff that influences or limits choices and opportunities available. Things like society, culture, politics, nature, geography, or as we've seen in the past few days, climate as well, right? And you can see how small that person is compared to all these big clouds hovering above him. On the other hand, agency refers to how much free will an individual has in their choices. So the person is looking at their hand, right? So structure is like the ocean or the environment around you, and agency is the direction or the actions that you put to change the way that your vessel in life sails towards. So as a personal finance page, admittedly, right, we are focused a lot on self-improvement, on what you can do to better your situation, the agency. So what the person can do. So these are things like, for example, your habits, the company that you keep, your personal values, your abilities to make the right decisions. And in this boating analogy, which we didn't choose because of what happened a few days ago, this is just what happened to me. It's a good analogy, right? Really, it's not bad, right? So in this analogy, it's like the parts on your ship which you can modify and optimize. So for example, the masting on the top where you can look out with a telescope for nearby islands and opportunities, that's like your ability to network. Your sail that you can put up to catch the wind so that your boat can move passively is like your investing ability. Your earning power is your ability to row the boat and the mechanisms upon which you can apply your muscle ability to move your vessel. And savings would be, for example, like float on the side of your boat that helps to keep it buoyant up so that it doesn't sink. But it's also important to recognize the role of structure in limiting the choices that we have. I think this one I don't need to say more than just look at what happened in the past few days. Right? There's nothing that you can control, and if you have savings, you have a certain position, or if geographically you happen to be in a place that is not as affected, for example, you will have an easier time. You can't just say, hey, try harder and you'll survive better. You're not in the same place, right? So for example, in this example, there's a freaking kraken there, right? What can you do against that? Going against this tidal wave, what can you do, right? So structure, let's go a bit more into structure. Structure can be geographical, it can be where you're born. If you're born into a developed country, it's far easier to invest than if you were in an undeveloped country. For example, if you talk about personal finance, when it comes to investing, one of the products that is most touted, for example, is the S&P 500 or the American market in general. But there's a cost to invest there. If you're from a country that doesn't have that kind of a connection, economically, there's a cost in you investing in the American stock market. So that is a cost as well. If you just happen to be born in a country where it has better relations with America economically, or if you happen to be born in America, you can access the stock market for much less of a cost. So for example, carry on. For example, like if you want to invest in some other islands, there will be like an agent or broker that will say, I'll help you, but you have to pay me, right, for this costing of the So structure can also be cultural. So for example, if a female is born to a culture that thinks that women should not deal with money, it would be more difficult for her to start investing or run a business. You hear a lot about this, a lot of like disparaging terms like being a diva, you know. So it's real, just ask any woman, she would know, right? Structure can also be classist. For example, if you're born into a less well-off family, you might find it harder to make important connections that might help you in your career. So, for example, if you want to make it to a higher position, like if your father just happens to know somebody who's also in a higher position, it's much easier to just get your way in, right? And it must be nice. You see other people have to climb the side, and they might fall and hurt themselves, and it'll take them some time. Whereas if you have a big father, not literally but like with context, they can just raise you up, you know, and we're down there going, it must be nice, you know. So you find that the effects of structure can compound. Like for example, if you are in a developed country, you have a supportive culture for business or progression, and you also come from a family with a high socio-economic status, it's easy for you. You feel like life is just easy, the wind is blowing in the sails of the direction that you want to go in. And on the other hand, it can also compound negatively, where if you're in an undeveloped country, you have low socio-economic status, and your culture is unsupportive of what you're trying to do, it's of course going to be much tougher for this person to progress. So what does this mean? It means that the first one, an obvious one, is that life is definitely unfair. I have to say that again, life is definitely unfair. And we all start off at unequal points with unequal resources. So you see in this case, like, they all have different boats. And in fact, there's somebody with a wooden raft that has a debt on it. Well, this person's success is not even going far, is to get rid of that debt ball chain, right? So for that reason, it's important to be empathetic to others who are less privileged and be grateful for the opportunities that you have. So there's a reference there, if you watch Attack on Titan, you know, it's Tatakai, you just have to fight, right? And remember that people don't choose whether they start off rich or poor. Otherwise, everybody just choose rich or poor, right? Yeah. So on another level, it also means that everyone has not only different paths to success, but different definitions of success. So I know a few people in Singapore who comes from families that are very rich and have very successful family businesses. And in my particular example, right, 100% of these people that I know have no interest in continuing the family business. They face a lot of pressure to take over the family business, but none of them want to do it. Some of them eventually do it because they tried their hand in their dream and then it didn't work, then they say, this not bad, you know. And from my perspective, I was always very jealous of them because I always had entrepreneurial aspirations, and I'm like, wow, the family runs like a, you know, like what do you call it, taufu, like a bean curd, you know, chain. It's so successful. All you have to do is take it over. Why not just do that?
I think it's Douhua.
Douhua, do you know what Douhua is? It's like a bean curd, a soy bean curd thing, and it's a sweet kind of thing. If you all go to Singapore, then try it. It's very good, right? And even though they are pretty much set for life, I have friends who, for example, when they graduate, their family will give them an apartment, so they never have to worry about rent ever again. And I'm like, it must be so easy for you, but not necessarily, because they also could face a lot of pressures. For example, for someone who inherited wealth, success could be creating a multi-billionaire dollar company. Because a multi-million company is what the parents have made, so success is even higher than that. And even worse, success could be that you must take the family fortune, the family business, and make it a multi-billion company. That is very hard. And from my experience, all my friends who can inherit this kind of thing, they don't no interest in it. They rather be a starving bohemian artist. This is true story, right? And inversely, for someone who inherited debt, success could just mean getting out of debt. So like I was saying earlier, for this person, success is starting at zero because they actually started at minus money. So the important thing here, I think when I drew this, I made a design problem which I now realize is that the don't compare is not so obvious. I should have made that very big with a white background. But that's the important thing. Don't compare, or at least compare in a way that is fair to yourself and fair to others. And finally, there's no such thing also of being 100% control of your destiny. But it's important to acknowledge that you have a role to play in your own life. After all, you may not be able to write your destiny 100%, but you may be able to shift the course with your actions. You cannot direct the wind and the oceans, but we can adjust our sails. Survive, then thrive. Stay woke, Salaryman. So that's the first story. My lovely co-founder will say it's the second story.
Yay, it's I, the lovely co-founder. Okay, so the title of this second comic is called Young People Are Obsessed with Investing. Here's why they should not be. And I think this story, what inspired me was like actually the pandemic and how people acted with their money during the pandemic. You will see like, you know, a lot of people got started with investing. A lot of people started to went to crypto. You know, they went in like neck deep in the crypto, and then a lot of people got burned, and then they tried and asked the government to protect them, even though it was a decentralized thing. But you know, more on that later. Yeah, so that was actually the inspiration behind this story. So I'm going to begin. So a long time ago, so maybe 10 years ago, right? Here's how I thought I would make my first $100,000. The idea was this: like I would take several years to save $10,000, and then I would make an extremely good investment. This investment would 10x my 100,000 to make it my 10,000 to make it $100,000. But this did not happen, right? I did indeed save my $10,000, but when I tried to invest it and turn it into $100,000, I was sorely disappointed. After an entire year in the market, it only grew by 1,002, which is actually not bad by today's standards, but because I had like inflated expectations of what investing should be, like I was crushed. Actually, a long time ago, I just thought you need like maybe like 5 or 6 trades to become a millionaire. So the first would be like 1,000 to 10,000, then 10,000 to 100,000, 100,000 to 1 million, 1 million to 10 million. Yeah, but it didn't happen. So yeah, sorry about that. I mean, it will not likely happen to you guys also. Yeah. So anyways, there are 2 takeaways I have from this episode, and I hope they will help you. The first is to have a clear understanding of what reasonable returns are. So reasonable returns or reasonable expectations is not growing your money by 1,000% within a year. Neither is it 100%. I think nowadays on TikTok you will see a lot of like FinTalk influencers, right? They will say stuff like, oh, you know, if you do this trading thing, you just need to increase your net worth, right, by 1% a year, then by the end of it, you know, you
Well, let's say 1% a day.
oh, like 1% a day, yeah, then you have
Which is a lot.
365% by the end of the year, which is like almost impossible.
You would be probably the greatest investor of all time if you
I think so.
actually can do that.
I think so. I think, yeah, within like 2 years you can buy out Elon Musk. Yeah. So just for reference, like Warren Buffett, the world's most famous investor, managed only 20% per annum from 1965 to 2021. So this is Warren Buffett. He's like a legendary investor, some old guy. His best friend died recently. RIP, Charlie Munger. Yeah. Industry professionals will be considered decent if they manage more than 10% over the long term. And for the average person who doesn't invest full time, right, they don't have like a Bloomberg terminal at home where they go check out all the data, they don't pour over financial statements released by companies, right? 5 to 8% is a more realistic number. So this just famous investor 20%, industry professionals 10%, average person 5 to 8%. And you must remember this is across the long term. It's very easy to, for example, make 20% in a single year. The idea is like, can you make 20% consistently? I think during COVID, some of my stocks, easily made like 200% because it was a crazy time. But that doesn't mean I'm a good investor. That just means like, I got lucky. Next slide. Yeah, the second lesson I learned was this. Like, many people link personal finance or gaining wealth very strongly with investing. And then they will try to become full-time investor. And it often doesn't work out well for them. Why? So there's a big reason, right? Because investing actually won't earn you a lot at the start. Because how much you get in returns actually depends on capital. So let's just say you have $10,000, right? And assuming you invest at a very realistic 7% per year, you get $700 by the end of the year, which is not bad, but not a lot of money. Next slide. So the lesson here is like when your capital is small, your returns are also small. So who of us here are millionaires already? Can you raise your hands? Okay, not a lot of people, right? Okay, maybe we should, yeah.
No, I raised your hand.
No, I raised my own hand. They asked me for consent. Anyways, so most of us don't start off with $1 million in life. So at this stage where your net worth is like zero, right? Your efforts are best served by increasing your capital. And how you do this? You work on your earning power. Instead of focusing on picking stocks, you can learn in-demand skills, negotiating for increment, doing a side hustle, starting a business, right? All these, right, will far outstrip what you might earn from the reasonable returns from $10,000. So you see on the slide, the person, by getting all these things, right, he earns an extra 4 plus 4 plus 12, what's that? 20K a year versus $700. Earning power is better. Next slide. So once you improve your income, you have more capital, and then the investment returns will increase as well. So if you have $100,000, now you get $7,000. And if you do it long enough, you can get $1 million, you can get 70K in investment returns, which is what you wanted in the very beginning. Next slide. So what should we do with this information? Number one is like forget about getting rich by investing. This often leads to people taking too much risk, leading to financial setbacks. So I do have a friend, pre-COVID, he made like 6 amazing trades. I think one of them was like Tesla, and another was Bitcoin. So what happened was that after a few trades, he thought himself to be like a god in the investing market. Because they are all wins. So of course you will think yourself like, I'm a winner. Every trade I make will win. But when it came to like, he bought this cryptocurrency called Luna, right? And that became zero. So he won big on all the 6 times. But the 7th time he lost big and he lost everything, and you start over from zero. And that is really rough. So sometimes even when you think you keep winning, like sometimes you are your worst energy. You are your worst enemy. But also, yes, your worst enemy. So forget about getting rich quick by investing. And second is to invest early with realistic expectations. So don't get us wrong, like investing is still very important. Just remember it won't be the main driver of wealth for your first $1 million. But every big counts, you should still invest. Number 3 is work on your earning power. There is no substitute for having good network, in-demand soft and hard skills. So for example, hard skills are technical skills often specific to your industry. I think nowadays there are a lot of like tech workers from the Philippines or Indonesia working in Singapore, and even remotely, even like places like the US. A lot of Singaporeans complain about Indonesian, Filipino stealing their job. But I mean, it's fine. It's fair game, right? I mean, everybody works hard. Everyone should have a chance at making good money. So I think it's fair, right? Foreign language skills, SEO marketing, and then of course there are other stuff like soft skills. Soft skills are really important because while they are not very technical, and often you'll find that they might not increase your earning power so much, what they do is that they complement your hard skills in a way that allows you to organize labor or become a manager. So even if, for example, even if you're like the best software engineer in the world, but you can't manage a team, nobody likes you at work. There's a limit on how much you can climb. I have a friend told me before that the difference between a CTO and like the best software engineer is like the software engineer often has the lead software engineer. It's often that the latter lacks the soft skills to actually present to the public and kind of like show people like create confidence in the company. So soft skills are very, very important. So finally, a good network will connect soft skills and hard skills with people who are willing to pay for them. So even though in the previous piece we kind of like alluded to that a little by saying that there are a lot of wealthy parents that put their kids into good places in the workforce, I feel like it's also not really 100% reasonable to kind of like dislike them for it, because if you think about it, like human beings are a very social species. From the very beginning, we hunted in tribes and we depended on connections to get by one another. So trust is a very important element. So that's why networking is important. And if you are not born with like the network that your family can grant you, I think the only thing left to do is to go and make the network yourself. And nowadays, you can write on LinkedIn, you can go meet people for coffee. It's been easier than ever with the internet. And sometimes you just need to ask people. So remember, you are the best investment you can make. Okay, also stay Woke Salaryman. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for that. You make a great read. Actually, it was such an easy book to read. It was super fun. I wish all books now are like web comics. All right, so let's move on to the Q&A. Okay, first question. So finance can be daunting and, to be honest, boring for most people to talk about. But you guys changed it. So what was your inspiration and driving force behind the Woke Salaryman, and why did you start it in the first place?
So I have one selfish reason why I started it. So last time I used to work in advertising, and then I had a disagreement with my boss about how we should do advertising and how to do content. So I told my boss, actually we could make personal finance interesting and people can follow, and then after that we might be able to make quite a lot of sales for the client. But he didn't believe me, so I started those and so in a way to prove him wrong, to kind of spite him. So I mean, sorry there wasn't more nobler intentions. But of course, at the same time, I also noticed that my fellow friends in the creative industry, in advertising, they were spending a lot of money and they had very bad money habits. And when I tried to tell them hey, maybe you shouldn't buy the new sneakers every month, if you want to buy a house in the near future. So I tried to send them the more traditional articles or stuff that I found really, really helpful. And they're like, man, I can't read this, it is so boring, I can't even get past the first page. So I thought, if we set the bar really, really low, maybe this low, right? More people would get into personal finance and be more accessible.
Yeah, so I'm an animator in training, and I'm the person who, I draw a lot less now, but I used to be the person that drew all the comics at the start. I draw less now because I have a colleague called Winsing who's amazing, and she's faster than me and better than me, so she just does it. I'm actually bad for the company when I draw, because I'm holding everything up, right? But at the start, I've always been a visual person. I love animation, I love comics as well. So Rin Ming was somebody, so we knew each other since we were 18 years old. And we're almost 36 years old now, so it's almost to the point where I've known him for half my life. And he has always been very savvy when it comes to financial stuff. So when I graduated and I was worried about money, he would always be the person that I would ask, hey Rin, should I invest this, should I invest that, should I start investing now? How much do I have in savings? How do I negotiate for my salary, things like that. And he would sometimes send me these articles about personal finance that were he said, so boring and so difficult to read. It's every 5 sentences I read, I need to Google something, because what's the Google? What's the unit of Google again? Or what's the SP now? Google again. So I always long for a visual version of Rin Ming telling me things, because he also gets it, because he's not finance trained actually. He learned all this himself and he's a copywriter. So he always thinks first from the audience point of view. And I'm very happy that we have the Woke Salaryman and I'm part of that because in a way it's like when I draw the stuff, I'm helping to distill meaning snack for understanding and also like communicating personal finance in a visual way for more people. I'm so glad that we are making something that I would have directly benefited from as a fresh graduate who had no idea about personal finance.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you speak to like finance professionals, they have been like working in for a while. They have this thing called like the curse of knowledge. So they assume everything like everybody knows, but actually there are so many things like even simple things to them like many people don't know. So we try to kind of like be the bridge. We're like the primary school of personal finance.
The first step. Yeah.
And I was like saying earlier that despite the fact that you guys come from an experience in Singapore, you still resonate a lot with the Filipino people, right? And it's really, really, really cool. And easy. Again, the best part about it is it's easy to digest. So it's been 5 years. What's the difference between the Woke Salaryman in 2019 versus the Woke Salaryman today?
Well, I think in the beginning, I think we wrote it from like an employee point of view, right? So in the beginning, if you look back at the writing, like a lot of it was like blaming like the companies and the bosses and the system and this is how you hack the system, and of course a lot of it was like around like very personal finance stuff. Like I think the more basic stuff like how much to save, what to invest in, stuff like that. But I think eventually we, as we became business owners ourselves, we started to see like the other side. And then we were like, oh wow, all this while we were, not exactly fair to people running businesses. So we kind of like broaden our perspective in that way. But another thing is that I think was also useful is that by broadening your perspective, you actually increase your earning power, which is one of the most important things when it comes to personal finance. For example, if you, as an employee, if you can't understand your boss's perspective, you can't solve their problems, how will you expect to get promoted? And of course, like that logic goes all the way up, whether you want to be in a high position that can not just earn a lot of money, but also shape the world in a way that you deem fit. So I think that's how we changed. We've kind of like broadened and went beyond personal finance. We've went to fields like economics, psychology, even governance in some sense.
For me, it's also about like Remy was talking a little about soft skills. I think earlier on when we were just building our page, right, our priorities were very different in that it was enough for us to reach people that already had this kind of growth mindset or this kind of ambition to do better financially. But as we grow our page and we have reached these people, like we're also thinking about how we can reach people who are not trying to seek out personal finance or like progression kind of topics. And that's the difficulty because oftentimes people don't want to hear this stuff, but oftentimes the people that need to hear this stuff are the ones that you need to cross this additional barrier to reach. So we're thinking more and more about long-term like strategies of how can we reach people that don't naturally find us. And sometimes that comes with a trade-off because if we, for example, advocate for more like agency in your life to work harder, people might come and accuse us of trying to, for example, make everybody hustlers. And why are you putting so much pressure on us to go beyond our comfort zone when our lives are already so much more uncomfortable? So we need to have a little bit of the capacity to give advice that people might A, not want to hear, and B, might not be very nice when they hear it. So we are okay with pushing that now because we are not as fragile as we were when we started. But what is also required is a little bit more sensitivity and a lot more like empathy when it comes to saying these kind of messages. So a lot of timing things, we think about pacing ourselves out. We can't put out 4 stories that's all about hustle. For every 2 hustle things, we might do one to validate your experiences as somebody who's trying to work at it from a more like less privileged view.
Yeah, that's even a struggle for like my small page. Like I don't want to super promote hustle culture, but then there's a chapter in your book that says, there should be a balance because sometimes you do need a side hustle, right? To get out of the...
We kind of see it like you want to be a good friend. And a good friend is not somebody who just tells you what you want to hear. A good friend will tell you, hey, you gotta stop that, it's bad for you. You don't want to hear it, you might lash out a bit, but we'll be here for you.
So we should get a TikTok.
What?
You should get a TikTok soon.
We are on TikTok, we just don't look at it.
Yeah. Like post and forget. Okay, so you've talked about how you hope your platform would empower people to have a better relationship with money. So my question is, why do you think people have this aversion when it comes to money? And what do you think should be the right, relationship with money?
I think it's natural for people that have not had good experiences with money or feel like they are not doing well in life because of the lack of money that they have to have a natural aversion towards it. Like we said, when it comes to the first story, we were both there when we felt like the whole system is rigged against us. Why do we even bother? So I think it's a very natural thing. But speaking from experience, I think it's just like we truly believe that whatever your situation is, even if it's very difficult, you need to think about what are the cards that you have in your hands that you could play. And sometimes it could be a very limited set of cards that you can play. But success in life, to me, is not about scoring higher than other people. It is looking at the cards that I have and making the best play that I ever could. So it's more about starting with my situation, what I can do, not about scoring more than other people, because other people have different hands than me. So I think aversion is natural, and we're trying very hard to make it easier and easier, but we still understand that. That's why we need to find ways to prod in the algorithm to reach people that might not seek out our content on purpose and take the hits when they lash out and say, you are pushing for something that is very toxic, but we'll be here.
Yeah, I think one thing that also why a lot of us don't have good relationship with money is because we kind of like normalize overconsumption, right? I think nowadays you have ads saying like, oh, take a holiday, you deserve it. But actually, like, what does the copywriter know? Do you really deserve a holiday? I think often, if you look deep enough, the answer might be no, right? Actually, you don't deserve a holiday. You just came back from, South Korea. You are like 6 months deep in debt. Yeah, you don't deserve a holiday. You should just work on it. And I think nowadays with like social media, with like influencers, with a lot of luxury stuff, they show like the aspirational lifestyle that actually can cost a lot, and it's actually not normal. So I think we have been conditioned to think like this is normal, and as a result, to reach that new normal, we spend money to achieve it, which actually damages us in the long run.
So you feel like the right relationship with money is kind of be like not compare yourself to others and don't attach like success to materialism.
Yeah, but of course there's like always a balance between like hustle and contentment, right? Because we live in a globalized world, I can tell you like if the average Singaporean doesn't manage to travel to Japan twice a year, they will like whine and cry because like, oh my god, my life is so terrible, air conditioning so expensive, I can't buy the newest iPhone, oh my god, so sad. But then if they don't hustle, at least to some degree, if they don't produce enough value compared to like the Indonesians, the Filipinos, then why do you deserve the latest iPhone 16? If you can decouple yourself from that expectation, then I think that's fair. So what I'm saying is that you need to realize first like what you want, then you can hustle to the level needed to achieve it. If you don't need the latest iPhone 16, right? Is it 16 now? I don't know. Yeah, one of those, right? Then you won't need to hustle so hard. Right.
Guys, you heard that, huh? Don't get the new iPhone. iPhone 20 na lang.
So the wording is also very important. Why we use the word relationship is because a relationship doesn't just set and forget. You have to cultivate it, you have to keep it up, you also have to keep. In a way, like going back to your finances to revisit it, to see if it is at the right place for you. A lot of times, like we shared previously, like when you have financial goals and you set it, you need to revisit it, otherwise, because your life goals changes as well. If you have a kid, for example, it will completely destroy your life and replace it with another life. So it is something that is not set and forget, you always need to come back to it. That's why we use the word relationship.
Okay, so speaking of relationships, so tell us a bit about your relationship, your partnership. So you're the illustrator, you're the writer. So your roles naturally fit together. But other than that, what makes you think your relationship works so well?
So we've been friends since we're 18 years old. And we are friends first before we are business partners. So you hear this thing about, don't start business with your close friend, don't start business with your like husband, wife, or girlfriend, boyfriend, that kind of thing. And I think there's some truth to that, because the closeness can make it hard for you to address some things, because outside of this work relationship, you also have a real social relationship. And sometimes when you have a disagreement about work, there's a chance where it will also like taint the personal relationship. As much as you try not to, it will bleed over. So I think what for me makes it very easy for me to, even when we do disagree, which we do disagree on, to afterwards step out of it and go, yeah, it's okay. Like either I compromise or I have my say, but I understand that he won't take it personally. It's because I know that at the end of the day, he loves me. And this is true, right? And this is true because every single day when we leave the office, if I go or he go first, we will say I love you.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and it's not an easy thing for me especially because my dad never told me this stuff. So I don't have this in my heart. I love my guy friends, but there's always the kind of. So Ring was the first guy friend that told me that, and it gave me this ability to also say it to my friends. So now I feel like when I say it to my other male friends, they're like, okay. But like we normalize it to the extent where literally at the end of the day, whatever argument that we've had about the business, this or that, first off, I know that he loves me. Second of all, I know that whatever disagreement we have comes from the fact that we both want just the best for our company and also our ultimate customer, which is actually the reader. Because our clients will not come to us if we don't have readers. So the reader is our end customer. And we both understand that. We just disagree in the way that we should serve it. So sometimes he will let me have it, sometimes I'll let him have it. Yeah.
Can you say it now?
I love you.
So yeah, it's easy. So Rachel is the second man I tried it on, right? The first man is my dad, right? So after like successful trials with my dad, I tried it on Rachel. Yeah, I love you, Rachel. Right.
Okay, so this is my second to the last question before the audience's question. But you guys started the Woke Salaryman based on your own experiences as workers and creatives living in Singapore. But why do you think your experiences and your webcomic resonated with Southeast Asia and I guess other parts of the world?
Well, I think last year when we released a comic that generated a lot of hate in Singapore, we also noticed like there was a subreddit in Berlin also discussing the same thing. Like, and then they're like, oh my god, this page sucks, don't follow them. But I think a lot of it is because like a lot of countries around the world face the same problem, especially among young people. Like housing is like way beyond like people's means now, right? Aging population, people are living longer, and hence they are costing the country like resources, and they are working in jobs earlier, longer, so young people might not be able to kind of progress as they might have 50 years ago. So I think a lot of the problems faced by young people are universal. Yeah, and I think it's amazing that our content reaches people around the world because growing up I always thought that my parents always tell me like actually in Singapore don't be a creative, right? Singaporeans just like to read like stuff from like the US, Europe. So like actually just white people have like a grip over like this creative stuff, like Asian people shouldn't even try. So now I'm really happy to see that nowadays, I mean apart from that, there's so many great Asian content creators like K-drama is gaining steam.
Yes, exactly.
Anime, Thailand. You watch like How to Make Millions Before Grandma Die, that film?
I've heard good things
Yeah,
about
it's pretty cool. So I mean, actually I forgot the question, but yeah.
Why your content resonates?
So I'm from Malaysia, and I'm a permanent resident in Singapore. I went over to Singapore to study when I was 7 years old, and I moved out of Malaysia to live in Singapore by myself when I was 18 years old. So I think I offer a little bit of that sort of Southeast Asian perspective also, not being in Singapore, because Singapore is an anomaly. Singapore is an unusual kind of an oasis in the desert in Southeast Asia. Singapore is extremely prosperous, and I think like a lot of Singaporeans don't understand how good Singapore is, and I get very frustrated when I see Singaporeans whine about stuff that Singapore does extremely well. So a lot of that frustration also powers the story that we tell, and like a lot of the stories that we write is also coming from the perspective of, do you understand the wider world that we live in, Singaporeans, and how good you have it, and also what you can improve on when it comes to things like passion and purpose, and also like you being rich but you're also miserable, things like that. So our cover is a shot of the Singapore skyline. We are very proudly local in terms of like where we come from, in terms of like we are trying to export Singaporeanness as well, and I'm doing that as a Malaysian. There are a lot of things about Singapore that are good and bad, so we are putting that very upfront and center as the locale of where our perspectives come from, and we are not afraid of being honest about our location. I think a lot of the best things in literature and creative things are local and honest. And when you don't purposely try to make things that are watered down and generalized for an international audience, you actually end up very genuinely and authentically hitting on points that will resonate with the rest of the world, whether or not they're in the same situation as you. But I mean, say, a lot of the problems that Singapore face is also a lot of the problems that the world or even Southeast Asia as a whole, like rising inequality, housing prices for young people, things like that. So just by being honest to things that we feel in our hearts, I think we actually reach better.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be so general and reach everybody.
Yeah, and I think for us as readers, well, I don't know, but for me, it's kind of comforting that, oh my gosh, Singaporeans are going through the same thing as us, so we're all in this together, I guess. So lastly, your fans and followers in the Philippines are dying to know, like, what's next for you guys? How do you see your company in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
We're avoiding bankruptcy, as you know. That is our number one priority. But every year we joke like, oh, we haven't bankrupt yet, let's go one more year. So we've always been kind of pessimistic. I guess like starting a business in the COVID time does this to you. So the book is one way that we're outreaching to try to diversify our income source, because right now most of our stuff is sponsored content. And that is not a bad model, but we don't think that that will be our model forever. So that is one thing that we try to do. But apart from that also, I feel like it's also important to understand what you do well and what you already have. I feel like a lot of companies sometimes fall into this trap of thinking that they need to keep doing new things and expanding. Sometimes doing this to the point where they actually endanger their main business, the McChicken of their business, the thing that just sells well, you know. So we also are taking good care to not expand beyond our horizons. We do the YouTube thing also, it doesn't cost us a lot of money. I do it all myself. I set up the camera, the sound and stuff like that. If I don't know how to do mic setup, I'll just Google it and learn it, you know. So we are carefully expanding within our comfort zone while not abandoning, I think, what makes us good. Anyway.
Nothing there, thank you.
Okay, whatever it is, we're gonna be on the lookout. So right now it's time to open the floor to questions from the audience. So earlier we asked you to scan a QR code. So thank you for your questions, and I'll be reading out some. Okay, so from Teal Math. Teal Math, are you here? Okay, you can stay anonymous if you want. Should I feel guilty if I don't give monetary support to my parents? So that's a big thing in the Philippines, actually.
Wow, the hard question you just showed me right in. Thanks. Wow, okay, so obviously, so we wrote an article before, so I think obviously it's nice if you can give money to your parents. But I do think it really depends on the quality of upbringing that your parents give you. For example, I'm not going to say stuff like, he's my dad, so no matter what, I owe him more. For example, if he murdered 5 people and one of them was like my mom and my sibling, then actually, I feel like it's fair game to say, okay, I don't owe you anything there. I mean, you did kill mom and 5 of my siblings, right?
Yeah,
right.
Valid, super valid.
Sorry. I mean, I knew I went quite hardcore, but don't worry. Let me get to my point. Okay. So it really depends on like the quality of care you have. I mean, for example, if the parent did all they could to kind of like raise you, then I feel like you should put in some effort. It's what a decent person to do. But at the same time, I don't want to normalize, like a kind of like a shareholder relationship between like the parent and child. For example, like I birthed this baby, and then suddenly now in the future I will own 50% of the baby's assets. I mean, or like a bondholder relationship. For example, now this baby, I will tally up the invoice and I'll charge interest at 3 to 5% a year, and then son, you owe me $5 million. Congratulations, right? I don't think that's healthy as well. So is someone angry? I'm so sorry. It's just my personal opinion. It's just my personal opinion. Don't be angry. All right. Wait, I lost my train of thought. Okay, yes. No, I lost my train of thought again. Why not you hold the thought? What I think?
Okay, that's what I think. Like this kind of family stuff. The reason why I gave it to him also, right? I feel like I come a bit more from a privileged position because I think the greatest gift that my parents gave me was that they settled their own retirement. And that is a huge gift because it allows me in my 20s and 30s to chase my dreams because I didn't have to, what they call like a sandwich generation where you have to support the generation on top and the generation below you. So, if you are in that position, there's not a lot that I could say without being disingenuous about, I give you advice and stuff. But I think based also on a lot of conversation with my friends, this is one of the hardest things to get over because no matter how savvy you are, however many logical and objective arguments you have about personal finance and what your parents should do, one of the hardest things is to persuade your parents to listen to you because you know better than them. This is very difficult because that is the nature of your relationship, that they know better than you and they should take care of you. So when that is reversed, it is so difficult. So what Remy was talking also about is the idea of like, if for example your parents have a habit that costs a lot of money, they like to gamble, and they say as part of your allowance to me every month, you should also have a recreational fund that bends according to my gambling. I mean, that's not reasonable, I think, especially when a young person is trying to carve out a life for themselves and things like that. So there should be some limits, but it's so difficult for us to define what these limits are. It really comes from your position. But should you feel guilty? I really think not necessarily. It depends on the dynamic.
Yeah, so I still forgot my previous point, but I have a new point after you say I remember. Yeah. And I think like coming out of the sandwich generation is like a shared effort. So I mean, I don't think we should blame like the older generation for not planning retirement because it was not normalized during that time, right? But like, it's kind of like we have to be like the bigger people. Like that mistake is already done and dusted. Like let's move on from that. But moving on, let's not create any more sandwich generation. But also, you know, for example, if you're still alive, you do all you can so you don't like affect the next generation. Because if the next generation doesn't have a better quality of life, or if you burden the next generation, then what would the point of it all, right? I mean, parents do have a responsibility to raise kids. And I mean, in a very real sense, even though like I use this as a very spiteful retort to my parents, I really do not ask to be born, right? So if anything, the parents do have responsibility to children first. Then depending on how well the service was provided as a parent, I mean, not to make it like a business thing, then the child will kind of like return that favor with gratitude, of course. I mean, not to make it a whole transaction thing.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, right, as you said, especially now in our 20s, 30s, we're really like in a place where, you know, there's a lot of information out there, like your books and your page, and I think it's our priority, or it's our responsibility not to, you know, pass on the burden. Yeah, so it's really situational. So next question, when is the best time to pursue a master's degree? Or do you believe in getting a master's degree?
So I have a master's degree, and the only reason I got a master's degree was when I was about to graduate my bachelor's program, which I studied animation in Singapore, right? And then I remember when I was in the final year, I was looking at job opportunities, and I was looking at the salaries. And I'm like, oh my goodness, animation cannot earn much money. So at the time, my school came out with a master's program that had a scholarship, and I thought, then I do the master's thing, and it would delay the inevitable graduation for 2 more years while I get an allowance. So having been through that process now, what I ended up doing was I went through my master's, and I wrote a 27,000 word essay about expressing Singapore national identity through animation, right? And honestly, I tell you, I don't think that paper did any benefit to the world. It was just a way for me to kind of get through it. But having said that, there is a point to doing a postgraduate degree. Number one, if you want to be an academic person, you want to do a PhD, or if you want to teach in academia later, you would need at least a master's degree. This is a fact. So if you're interested in that, and there's real merit to that because I also teach part-time in Singapore now. I teach at the school that I used to be from. And it's a very, very nice experience. You know? It really gives you meaning, and it helps you to stay relevant with young people. That aside, the other benefit is that going through a master's or PhD postgraduate experience, right, it puts you through a different kind of journey and that forces you to learn how to sell in an academic way. What I mean is this, if you're writing a thesis paper in a postgraduate sense, you can't just say, this film expressed national identity because I felt like it did. No, not enough. You have to go and quote the person who defined national identity and cite examples of the film to build a staircase to reach the point that you're about to make. And this helps a lot in some situations. For example, if you want to make sales, you want to convince a client of something. A lot of people think sales is just like facts combined with emotions, but it's also a lot more. It's also logical steps that you can logically take to build an argument that cannot be objectively broken down. The masters helped me to learn that. But I think if you have no aspirations for PhD or teaching in academia, I feel like it might not be that worth it just to do just a master's. This obviously also depends on what you are doing if it's a medical thing, yeah, of course, this kind of thing, you need a certain amount of certification. You can't just say, I'm a doctor because I feel like I'm a good doctor. You need to go and get the proper things to do some things. And we wouldn't want a world where you can be a practicing chemist or doctor without that kind of rigor. So it depends on what you want to do. Yeah, a bit of complex thing to answer, but that's my 2 cents on it. Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is like opportunity cost, right? If you take off like 1 year from the masters, I mean that's a whole income of staff loss to invest in, make more money. Yeah.
It really depends.
Yeah, it really depends.
And also like where you're
Oh,
going.
maybe one more. Maybe like if you do like MBA, so maybe you have like a good network, depending on the people who go on the program with you. But nowadays there's like a hit of it. Sometimes you have like these people who just want to put masters in their bucket list, and then they just go for fun, and after that it doesn't really translate to any real world meaning anyway. But I mean, maybe you make friends. I don't know.
I think it really depends. I think if you have the means, why not? If you have the time. Okay, so here, what questions can I ask in an interview to determine whether the workplace is toxic or not?
Well,
It's very specific.
Well, I think it's very hard nowadays because both employees and employers, right, can like smoke each other really well. I mean nowadays you have like YouTube things that tell you exactly what to say, like where is you in 5 years, then they say, oh, we're in this company in a senior position. I mean everyone is just rehearsed, so I feel like interviews nowadays are extremely inauthentic and actually to a large extent quite meaningless. And I mean unless you're doing like testing for skills, at a tech company, you do 5 rounds to see whether is there like a cultural fit, stuff like that. So I think questions you ask, I don't think there are any good questions you can ask because like this can be masked easily. But I mean nowadays there are like sites like Glassdoor, you can go and like search what people say about the company. You can ask for people like within the company or people who have left the company. So people always ask people who are still working there. But one trick is to ask people who have left it.
Yeah.
Right? And then they will have a lot of shit to say about why they left, so on and so forth.
I think nowadays job hopping is a lot more common than it was in the past. And one of the best things you can, because I'm assuming that this question is asked from either a very specific experience or a fear of joining a company that's toxic. And you just really can't know from the interview alone. You could, for example, ask about what's your flexi work policy like, and they can just lie. They can just say later, well, but it's a crunch period, we really need you to hustle it out. I know we said this or that. So they can just lie. But actually the best way to keep yourself assured and confident is to always be able to stay valuable, to be able to find a new job if you need to exit a toxic situation. That is the best thing you can work on to keep yourself assured. So I hope that helps you.
I agree with that.
And also having an emergency savings or
Yes, of course.
Yeah, then you don't need to be like a beggar and stay at a job.
Yeah.
Always be in a powerful position versus your employee.
Okay, so we have another question. Aside from starting poor or being a female, have you considered giving advice as well on how to make the best out of being neurodivergent in terms of wealth creation, surviving the adult world?
Wow, this is so hard because I don't think we are qualified to kind of like talk about stuff that we are not, that educated in. So I mean, we do have like our realm of like what is comfortable, and also I think nowadays, it's also really quite sensitive. So I'm afraid, I don't have any special. Do you have any special?
So again, I'm not clinical. I don't know this for a fact, but some of the people that I know who are neurodivergent from my own experience are good at other things. For example, I think the friends that I have who are neurodivergent, right, a large majority of them I think would be incredible investors, and some of them are, because they are able to not just be swayed by social and like current news situation, and actually they seek out to be contrarians, and they become good at investors as a result because they are able to zig when the whole world is zagging. They are very comfortable with being contrarians and taking the opposite stance. So they are difficult sometimes to get along in the social sense, but a lot of times they are also aware of that fact. But when they understand their strengths and are willing to accept that some things are just harder for them, the same way that some things are also just harder for those of us who are, for example, not as neurodivergent, then you can really find opportunities that might benefit your specific skill set, whether you are neurodivergent or not. So I think like, for example, remote work has made this open up a bit more in the sense that, I also identify as somebody who's very introverted and not very good at navigating social situations a lot of times. I get anxious very easily. But for example, if I can find a situation where I can remote work and contribute at a high level, that takes a lot of anxiety out of the, for example, the face-to-face thing, if I'm not so good at that. So I think there are opportunities out there. Just be willing to take your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I think it's always about knowing what you're good at, what you can back on, and then really double down on that. And as you learn new skills, right? So, okay, another one. What specific insight do you need from us Filipinos so that we can create better content that could be applied to us and the rest of our neighbors in Southeast Asia?
Fantastic question, because we do have a quest when we come here, so we want to talk to people and understand what the situation. So just now we were Maria for a while, then we just kept asking her question.
I was so pressured in the back.
Yeah. So here's what we would like to know. What is the situation like on the ground level first off? What are the personal finance habits and some of the troubles that you are facing when it comes to moving up the value chain or moving up when it comes to the social classes, like social mobility? What is it like? Are there systemic barriers to that? Also, are there things like, for example, in Singapore, we have this thing called buy now, pay later. Are there things like payday loans? How does that affect the spending habits of people? Are there things like predatory lending apps, which we found was a big problem in Jakarta apparently, that was not so big a problem in Singapore where we come from. So these things will be extremely helpful. But also, when it comes to things like dreams and aspirations, what does the average Filipino dream of doing, and what is the difficult things that typically get in the way of that? These are things that we would love to hear more about. Anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's not just about finding what is different, but also what is similar between both our nations. Southeast Asia is, people always look at Southeast Asia as a whole, but actually there's so many diverse different cultures and different aspirations within the whole region as well.
So can your readers just leave you a DM, leave in comments? How do we share this information?
Later if you come and do the book signing, you can talk to us and share some stuff that you think is very important. We love to hear you.
Okay, please, don't be shy later on. Okay, last question. Where did the idea of the marshmallow narrator come from?
So I'm a big fan of mascots, and I love little companion things. Like if you watch, for example, Ghibli films, there's often little companion things, right? Like a little, like in Princess Mononoke, you had these little tree spirits that would take, then Spirited Away, she had 3 things follow her around for more than half of the journey. So I always thought it would be good visually and also merchandisingly, to have something that we could, use. So this came from, I think, our second or third comic, which we wrote about this experiment. What is it, a test? It's a test, right? Some kind of experiment that they did, and it's called the marshmallow test. And the marshmallow test consisted of you giving a kid a marshmallow, one marshmallow, and you say to the kid, Timmy, if you can, I'll give you this one marshmallow now, you can choose to not eat this marshmallow, or you can choose to eat it now, then you have one marshmallow, or if you don't eat it for 30 minutes, I come back, right, I'll give you another marshmallow. So you get 2 marshmallows if you can wait. So the idea was that they concluded, and then it has been since, people have debated whether this is a fair conclusion. The test concluded that children that were better able to delay immediate gratification, would tend to be more successful in life. So we thought that this was a very fundamental idea that serves us very well. So for example, instead of playing my PlayStation, I dedicate an hour every day of my day home from school to studying. That will allow me to study, and I can get better results at exams, and I have more opportunities when I'm graduating, things like that. So this comes down to everything, things like when it comes to investing, you just jump on the hottest new thing that has no precedence or more than 5 to 10 years of track record, or do you wait because you want to see how the plays out first? So because this is so fundamental, we made it like a little thing. So it's a very useful narrative device, by the way, because oftentimes we could just choose to say, here is why you should move up the value chain, a slideshow, a TED talk. But it would be so nice also sometimes when we have this option to tell a story where somebody say, oh, the world is unfair, I feel this, I feel that, then the marshmallow pops up and goes, well, you should reconsider that. So it's like a kind of something that lives in the ether that pops up, and then you kind of don't know if it's real or not, kind of thing, so it's very useful.
Yeah, so every time you see the marshmallow now, it reminds you of delayed gratification. You wait before you order that iPhone.
It's actually not a toilet roll as many people believe online. So many people think this is the paper used to wipe yourself in the toilet. But it's not. It is a marshmallow.
I thought it was just a blob, to be honest. Alright, so that concludes our Q&A session. So thank you, Rumin and Wei Chun. It's been a pleasure to be with you. We wish you both more power, more success. Hope you don't get into bankruptcy, as you said, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your stay in Manila. So, once again, I am Marielle, so feel free to follow me at SimplyFinancePH. And to all of you guys, thank you for coming. We hope you enjoyed this afternoon's chat. Fully Booked has more events lined up this year, including the Manila International Book Fair this coming September 2024, upcoming Meet the Author and book signing events, and lots of promos and book giveaways. Don't miss out. Follow Fully Booked on their socials, visit their website fullybookedonline.com, and subscribe to their email newsletter to get the latest on their events, promos, and upcoming book releases. Don't miss this chance to grab a copy